Are you grateful for our band? Yeah. Yes, thank you guys for using your talents to lead us that way. We're so blessed here. Here, where we gather here at Far Hills Avenue is about a 20-minute drive from Hawthorne Street in Dayton, where Orville and Wilbur Wright grew up. And we're a bit proud of that fact here in southwestern Ohio. It's like, you like flying? You're welcome, world. You know, and it's interesting to me how I've observed how my relationship with flying, or rather I should say riding in planes, my relationship with riding with planes has evolved over time. When I was younger, I was a bit more casual about it. You know, I would just kind of casually walk on a plane and go along for the ride, and it was like no big deal. I didn't even have to think about it. But for some reason, unknown to me, as I've gotten older, I'm a bit more conscious about it. Like, I don't want to portray that I'm like white-knuckling and hyperventilating when I'm on a plane, but I'm a little more sensitive to like all the sounds. Like, oh, is that normal? You know, like that kind of thing. And so I know that different people have different experiences with airlines, but my most recent flights, I've really appreciated flying Delta because I know that Delta, they're not the only ones who do this, but I appreciate that they have the screens on the back of the headrest of the chair in front of you, because on those screens, you can watch a movie or a show, and I really like that, not because I'm an entertainment junkie, but because I'm someone in a plane who needs a distraction. I need a distraction and a diversion from my own brain so that I don't think things like, oh, here I am in this tube, 30,000 feet in the air, through a mechanism that I don't quite understand. You might as well tell me it's pixie dust, surrounded by about 200 strangers with very little personal space. And I don't know who this pilot is. What kind of morning did this person have? When's the last time this plane was inspected? And whoever did the inspections, were they on point that day? What about air traffic control? Did they get a good night's sleep? I start to think about how little control I have in that moment. And I don't like to think about these things, so I really like having that distraction. And so my reason for sharing this self-effacing tidbit about myself is because it serves as an analogy for what we widely do in Western culture to distract ourselves from some of the big questions in life. Questions about meaning and purpose. We don't take time to think about that. So we distract ourselves with all these diversions. We sometimes complain about being busy, but honestly, we can't live without being busy because it stops us from quieting ourselves long enough to think about these questions of meaning, which may feel like staring into some abyss and we don't know what to do with it. A Catholic philosopher named Peter Kreeft said that, can we go back? Of the 21 great civilizations that have existed on our planet, ours, the modern West, is the first that does not have or teach its citizens any answer to the question why they exist. A euphemistic way of saying this is that our society is pluralistic and leaves us free to choose or create our own ultimate values. A more candid way of saying the same thing is that our society has nothing but its own ignorance to give us on this, the most important of all questions. As society grows, it knows more and more about less and less. It knows more about the little things and less about the big things. Elsewhere, Kreeft writes that this big question of meaning is like a big rhinoceros sitting in our living room that we try to ignore. It's this big, obvious rhinoceros. And so he says, how do you cover up that big, obvious rhinoceros in your living room? You cover it with 1,000,000 mice. You cover it with 1,000,000 mice, little lesser things that cover up that thing that you don't want to think about. Yeah, I thought about asking AI to generate an image of 1,000,000 mice covering a rhinoceros, but the thought of it was really disturbing, so I thought better leave that alone. But that's what we do. We are diverted and distracted by 1,000,000 other things that keep us from peering into that question of meaning. The author Leo Tolstoy, one of the great authors of the 19th century, Russian novelist, wrote War and Peace. He experienced a good bit of fame and success in his time, but there was a point when he turned about 50 where he started to have a bit of an existential crisis, starting to ask some of these big questions. And he said these questions nearly drove him at age of 50 nearly to suicide. And he says that his questions were like, what will come of what I do today and tomorrow? What will come of my entire life? Why should I live? Why should I wish for anything or do anything? Or to put it still differently, is there any meaning in my life that will not be destroyed by my inevitably approaching death? My deeds, whatever they may be, will be forgotten sooner or later, and I myself will be no more. Why then do anything? How can anyone fail to see this and live? That's what's amazing. It is possible to live only as long as life intoxicates us. Once we are sober, we cannot help seeing that it's all a delusion, a stupid delusion. Nor is there anything funny or witty about it. It is only cruel and stupid. Anyone encouraged by old Tolstoy there? That's hey, thanks, man. Put that on your refrigerator. Yeah. But some of what we've talked about so far is related to the passage we'll read today. And you can, if you have your Bibles, you can open up to Ecclesiastes chapter 2 as we continue our Summer of Wisdom series. Last week, Tom Barlow helpfully broke us into the book of Ecclesiastes, introducing us to a writer named Koheleth. He identifies himself as Koheleth, which means either teacher or, better yet, perhaps professor. And some assume that the professor is indeed King Solomon himself. And I think with what we'll read today, Solomon fits the profile of the person writing today, because clearly this person had means to be able to do quite a lot of things. But the thing, assuming this is Solomon, a couple of things to review is that Solomon often used the word vanity or meaningless. In Hebrew, it's the word havel. And Tom helpfully last week illustrated this through lighting a long match. And he had Todd try to catch the smoke in a plastic container. And no knock on Todd, but it really didn't work all that well. It's not designed to, right? It's hard to catch smoke in a plastic bin, and that's the point. Smoke dissipates. It's elusive. It's this enigma. There's so many of these enigmas in life that are hard to nail down, and so that's one thing that Solomon just points out over and over and over. But another phrase that Solomon uses is the phrase "under the sun." And when he's using "under the sun," it's basically a hypothetical of just simply imagining the world. It's just the here and now. It's just the earth, and that's it. Under the sun is irrespective of God or eternity. It has nothing to do with God or eternity. It's just life under the sun. So in a way, in what we'll read today, Solomon is doing a reverse John Lennon. And we've talked about the song by John Lennon, Imagine, before, where he's like, hey, imagine there's no heaven, above us only sky. And so wouldn't that be great if people would just live for today, live lives of peace and share all the world? Wouldn't that just be great? Imagine this kind of vision of utopia. Well, Solomon, in essence, does the same thing. Yeah, indeed, imagine there's no heaven. Imagine above us there's only sky. Imagine it's just life under the sun. Isn't that dreadful? Isn't that dreadful? And it doesn't matter if the people are living for today or living lives of peace or sharing all the world. If that's the case, it's all meaningless anyway. Because whether you were cruel or wicked or good and virtuous in this life, we all end up the same. And no one's going to remember you. So therefore, who cares? Isn't that dreadful? So he's inviting us into this under the sun experiment. And within this experiment, he's taking a lot of the things that we commonly do in order to distract ourselves from true meaning, or looking for the ways that we often look for meaning and fulfillment and satisfaction and purpose, those types of things. And so, but before we get into our text today, just to review, each week so far in the Summer of Wisdom series, we've kind of narrowed down the teaching to one word in each week. And that one word is connected to wisdom. These are things that you at least need to have the essence of in order to become wise. So in the first week, in Proverbs chapter 3, we boiled it down to the word trust. How we need to trust in the Lord and not lean on our own understanding. So if you're going to ever become wise, you have to begin with trust in the Lord. Next, we moved on to Proverbs chapter 4, where we talked about guarding our hearts, being vigilant over our hearts, because our hearts control the course of our life. From our hearts, we live our lives. So we have to guard both what we think with our hearts and the affections of our hearts. So if we're going to be wise, we must guard our hearts. In Proverbs 30, we talked about dependence, how we need to depend on God for wisdom and just the everyday stuff of life. We want neither poverty nor riches, but we need the things just to rely on God. That is part of wisdom. Last week, Tom broke us into Ecclesiastes 7 and talked about the importance of balance. If we're going to be wise, we need to avoid the extreme position on some things. Well, today, I would say that we can boil today's teaching into one word, and that's focus. Focus as opposed to the things that distract us. So in other words, with that big scary question of meaning, let's lean into it rather than be distracted by everything else to keep us from leaning into it. So when it comes to our passage in Ecclesiastes 2 today, it's been phrased several different ways, but I cannot improve on how a pastor named Gary Hamrick has broken it down. He says that here Solomon pursues what he calls the pleasure hunt, the measure hunt, and the treasure hunt. The pleasure hunt, the measure hunt, and the treasure hunt. So first we'll begin with the pleasure hunt. In chapter 2, verse 1, Solomon says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness, and what does pleasure accomplish? Now, laughter is a wonderful gift from God. Amen? I mean, some of our greatest memories are with our family and our friends when we're having a good time, when we're smiling, and when we're laughing. I spent 10 years doing youth ministry. And yes, I'm very happy with the work. I'm very happy with the relationships I got to form with young people doing so. But I think a lot of what gave me access to speak into their lives was the fact that we laughed so much together, because laughter is this great gift. Charles Spurgeon was, he's one of the most significant, probably the most significant preacher from the 19th century in the Western culture. He was a preacher in London. And he was once, somebody once complained about his use of humor in the pulpit. He said, the pulpit's sacred. You shouldn't be telling jokes up there. Well, Spurgeon replies by saying, if only you knew how much I was holding back, you would commend me. In other words, you don't know the half of what's going on in my head of the stuff I want to share, right? You'd be giving me props if you knew what I'm not saying. So the Mayo Clinic reports that laughter and silliness, those things decrease stress, increase immune system response, release endorphins, the feel-good hormones, relieve pain, decrease tension, stimulate the heart, liver, and other organs, improve circulation, and decreases the stress hormone cortisol. So laughter is a good thing. But however, laughter cannot be made into an ultimate thing. It can't be an ultimate thing. It's a gift, but it can't be where we find meaning and purpose. So even taking a lighthearted approach to life for Solomon wasn't going to do the trick of living a fulfilling, meaningful life. And this is evident as we think about what we learn about comedians. I mean, there's some comedians who just seem to always be just so lighthearted about life. They joke about everything. But we've learned that for some, behind the scenes, it's not so pretty. Take, for instance, Robin Williams. Robin Williams just lit up a room. I mean, he made so many people laugh. He brought so much joy and laughter to people's lives just by his wit and his just silliness, right? And but we've come to learn just from how his life ended that there was more to the story and that there was a darkness there. Same with Chris Farley, who it's hard to believe he's been dead almost 30 years, but again, a guy who just would just make everyone laugh, just being so silly, just so ridiculous. I mean, so it's almost hard to think of him as dead because he was so full of life. But again, we learned from how he died that behind the scenes, laughter didn't cure everything. And so while laughter is a gift, humor can serve as a mask for deeper wounds. So we can't look at it for meaning and fulfillment. Next in verse 3, Solomon says, I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. With this phrase, my mind still guiding me with wisdom, it seems that Solomon's saying, like, yeah, I was going to try partying, but with a seatbelt. All right, partying with a seatbelt, a controlled type of hedonism, if you will. Some commentators describe it, think more connoisseur, like a wine connoisseur, rather than an overindulgent drunkard type of thing. But he's still going to experiment. He's still going to see what it can do for him. But now here's the thing. In the scriptures like Psalm 104 and Ecclesiastes 10, it talks about wine being a gift and wine, gladdening the heart of people. But of course, the Bible also warns against drunkenness. It needs to be used with wisdom. But the thing about it is that things like wine or alcohol, we have to be careful not to use those things to fix our day, because they're not going to fix anything. We can't use them to drown our sorrows, because what's going to happen is the alcohol may take its effect, but eventually that effect wears off, and guess what? Your sorrows are still there. And now you have a headache, potentially. But your sorrows are still there. So it doesn't fix anything. And so even cheering himself, and perhaps what Solomon has in mind is, frequent just feasting and banqueting, telling jokes and eating good food and drinking good wine. But he says even this is it's meaningless. It's like smoke. It doesn't last. It can't give ultimate fulfillment. And then if you look down at verse 8, not only laughter and alcohol, it seems that Solomon implies that there was an aspect of sex. So he says in verse 8, I acquired a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. In verse 10 says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. Now, the thing about this word here, the NIV translates it as harem. Other translation has the word concubines. We're actually not sure what this word is exactly, or rather this phrase is exactly, because it's not used anywhere else. The etymology gives us some clues, but we're not actually sure, but interpreters argue that contextually it makes good sense. But in addition to that, just from what we know about Solomon elsewhere, like in 1 Kings 11, verse 3, it says, he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. So Solomon, as a king, as a rich guy, had access to lots of women. So think about this. This is 1,000 women, which means he could go to bed with a different woman for 2.5 years without sleeping with the same person twice. Now, here's something we need to understand when it comes to the Bible, especially if you're new to reading the Bible. We have to make a distinction between prescription and description. Prescription and description. Sometimes the Bible will describe something and say how something was without necessarily affirming it. It's not saying that it's good, it's saying just this is how things were. And so people have this question about polygamy when they read about these guys in the Bible who have multiple wives. Like, why did it seem that God was okay with polygamy? Well, there may not have been an outright commandment against it, but read the narratives. Whenever a guy had more than one wife, how did things go? Not great. Not great. So there's a strong implicit message in the Bible about no. Genesis 2 says, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. One man, one woman. That's the design. But whenever you mix things more than that, just chaos ensues. So we have to keep that prescription and description thing in mind. And we also have to just consider this about sex, that yes, God's design for sex is one man, one woman within a covenant of marriage. Anything outside of that is beyond the boundaries of what God designed. And with this, we can think about what C.S. Lewis wrote in the Screw Tape Letters. The Screw Tape Letters are a satire fiction about a high-ranking demon writing letters to a lower-ranking demon, and the high-ranking demon writes to the low-ranking demon and says, remember, when it comes to pleasure, that's God's territory. He invented those. We, with all of our research, with our experimenting, we have not been able to even produce even one. All we can do is to influence the humans to use these pleasures at times, in ways, or in degrees in which the Creator did not intend. And in nowhere is that more evident than how we misuse the gift of sex. Again, sex is a good thing. It's a gift, but it's a gift that's been misused. And Solomon has found that seeking fulfillment and meaning through that, smoke. It's smoke. So we go from seeking meaning through pleasure, from the pleasure hunt to the measure hunt. In verse 4, he says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs of water, groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also, again, think description, not prescription there. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In verse 9, he says, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me, and in all this my wisdom stayed with me. So he began to think, okay, maybe I can find meaning and satisfaction by what I accomplish, by setting goals and smashing them, right? By aspiring to do things and accomplishing things. And we still do this today. You know, we seek titles, we seek promotions, climb the corporate ladder, right? And we seek to accomplish these things that people will remember us for. Maybe we'll get a statue or a monument someday. Maybe our grandkids will tell about us for decades to come. And maybe that'll give us meaning. But what Solomon says in verse 11, yet when I surveyed that all my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. I don't really follow golf, but a friend of mine told me about Scotty Scheffler, who, if you follow golf, he's apparently the #1 golfer in the world. My friend says he's the closest thing to Tiger Woods that we've had in a long time, right? He's one U.S. Open away from becoming a Grand Slam champion. And before the British Open, he was giving a press conference, doing an interview, and it's so interesting what he says. Even ESPN picked up on it and posted an article about it. I'll paraphrase some of the quotes that he said in it, but he said, golf it's fulfilling in the sense of accomplishment, but it's not fulfilling from a sense of the deepest places of your heart. He said, that's something I wrestle with on a daily basis. It's like showing up at the Masters every year. It's like, why do I want to win this golf tournament so badly? Why do I want to win the Open Championship so badly? I don't know, because if I win, it's going to be awesome for like 2 minutes. You win it, you celebrate, get to hug my family, my sister's there. It's such an amazing moment, but then it's like, okay, where are we going for dinner? Life goes on. It feels like you work your whole life to celebrate winning a tournament for like a few minutes. It only lasts a few minutes. And look, I love putting in the work. I love getting the practice. I love getting to live out my dreams. But at the end of the day, sometimes I don't understand the point. In other words, as the number one golfer in the world, who's worth like $110 million, by the way, sees his own thing that that he does, and he sees it's not fulfilling from the deepest places of my heart. Now, from what I understand, Scotty Scheffler is a Christian, so I think he knows. So he's here talking about life under the sun, but he knows where ultimate fulfillment comes from. But I think he really articulates here, I think, what Solomon is talking about in terms of the measure hunt, seeking an identity, seeking fulfillment from your own accomplishments. Later on in verse 17, Solomon says, here's where he gets. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish. Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. He's like, look, all that I do, all that I have done, all that I have worked so hard for can be undone by one idiot. And as we read the narrative of Scripture, if this is indeed Solomon, his son Rehoboam made a very foolish choice, and it split the nation and the kingdom of Israel into two. Solomon had built it up into this great thing, and just Rehoboam just not good. His empire began to crumble a little bit, and then we read just what happened for centuries after that, and it's like, oh yeah, you're right, Solomon. All that you have built, it can go bad really quickly. And I think about, someone's pointed this out, and I think it's good. Think about those who established and paid for the institutions of Harvard and Princeton and Yale. These were initially created as religious institutions by Christians for Christians to, educate ministers and such. Is that what they are today? Not quite. So you can imagine these people who put forth all this money and effort and time to establish these institutions for Christian purposes, if they were able to see what they became today, they'd probably say, I want my money back. Or I wasted so much time. You say, why did I waste so much time? It's all of what I have done has gone up in smoke. So the legacy that we leave and the works that we do, we can't take it with us and we can't fix it as permanent. So we have the pleasure hunt, the measure hunt, then we get to the treasure hunt. Once again in verse 8, I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasures of kings and provinces. I acquired male and female singers and a harem as well, the delights of a man's heart. Solomon, as we know, according to the scriptures, was one of the most wealthy guys in history, just had more than plenty at his disposal. But even with that, even with having money and even with possessions, he couldn't find meaning there. Ecclesiastes 5, verse 10 says, whoever loves money never has enough. It's never fulfilling. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. Always chasing the next dollar, the next tax bracket, the next, marker of look how much I got. Meaningless. You can't take any of it with you. I've come across this recently. What often happens to lottery winners? How many of us fantasize about either winning the lottery or coming into some unexpected inheritance. There's a man named Don McNay who's a financial consultant to lottery winners, wrote a book called Life Lessons from the Lottery. And he says that so many people who win the lottery end up unhappy or wind up broke. People have had terrible things happen. People commit suicide. People run through their money. Easy come, easy go. They go through divorce. It's just the upheaval that they're not ready for. The curse of the lottery is that it makes their life worse instead of improving them. According to the National Endowment for Financial Education, about 70% of people who suddenly receive a windfall of cash will lose it within a few years. I don't know what the stats are anymore, but I think that was true at one time when it came to the NFL. It was like 80% of the guys who made these millions and millions of dollars ended up bankrupt. Third cousins come out of the woodwork and everything, and you try to impress them and hand them some money, and they just don't end up managing it well. There's a lottery winner named Jack Whitaker who in West Virginia won the lottery in 2002, $315 million lottery he won, but he regrets it. His daughter and granddaughter overdosed and died on drugs, and he blames the lottery winnings for it. He says, I wish I'd never won the lottery. I wish I had torn the ticket up. He says, I just don't like Jack Whitaker. I don't like the hard heart I've got. I don't like what I've become. Donna Mikan, who won the New York State Lottery, $34.5 million. She says that the big win ruined her life and led to emotional bankruptcy. Most of us think winning the lottery is the ultimate fulfillment, she says, but I found that that is not the case. She considered herself a happy person before the win, but she says, when we won the lottery, my inner dialogue was manic. I became more concerned about how I was being judged and perceived, not realizing I was the one doing the judging in the first place. If you ask me, my life was hijacked by the lottery. Now, there are some statistics that are pretty revealing in our culture. In the last 50 years, the average house size in America has tripled. And yet Americans have more of their possessions in storage units than any other country in the world. And there's enough square footage in storage units to put a roof over every man, woman, and child in America. American children make up 3% of the population of children in the world, but they own more than 40% of the toys. Let me repeat that. We make up, our children in America make up 3% of all the children, yet they have 40% of all the toys in the world. And while we are the richest country in the world, and yet when it comes to metrics of happiness, we rank 24th. And happiness metrics have been declining for decades now. And so all of these things really bear out what Solomon says about money not giving fulfillment and meaning and happiness. Yeah, it might help you with some temporary problems, but it can't help you with the ultimate problem of meaning, purpose, and happiness. So bringing this to a conclusion, what Solomon says in verse 24 is very interesting. He says, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? Now, read this, and at first I'm confused. I'm like, wait a minute. He just said that all his labor and all his toil and all that he worked for was pointless and meaningless. And now he says the best thing you can do is find enjoyment in your work. What are we doing here? I think what Solomon is doing here is that he's finally putting an end to the imagining hypothetical experiment of life under the sun, and he's bringing God back into the equation. And now that God is back into the equation, all of these ways that we've sought meaning and satisfaction, the pleasure, the accomplishments, and money, we can finally put all those things in their proper place, recognize all of those things are gifts. Those things are gifts that can be used in order for the worship of God. Those can be pointers to God of God's generosity and goodness. but in of themselves they are merely gifts, but they don't compare to the giver. But now that we bring the giver back into the equation, we can find meaning and enjoyment. Because it is a relationship with the giver. It is our relationship with God that we can know that we have meaning and purpose, and the things that we do in this world actually matter. The things we do in this world only matter if there is a God. If there is no God and this is it, then the things, they don't matter. But if there is a God, then what we do, having ripple effects into eternity, that's what makes it matter. So once we bring God back into the equation, we can then find some meaning, purpose, and satisfaction. It's no longer just life under the sun. As Solomon says, without him, who can find enjoyment? But with him, we can have enjoyment because those things are finally in their proper place. And those things can finally be aimed towards the means of worship, which is where we find true meaning. The next chapter in Ecclesiastes 3, verse 11 says, he has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to the end. He has set eternity in our hearts. That's why we can't find meaning in all this other things, because those are temporary. They're not designed to fill your hearts. They're temporary. They're like smoke. They dissipate. But what we're looking for more than pleasure, what we're looking for more than accomplishment or possessions, we're looking for transcendence. A transcendence that only God can offer, both through the quality of that relationship as well as the quantity, living forever. As the band comes, we can review a good old chestnut of a quote from C.S. Lewis, who says that it would seem that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition. Does that sound familiar? When infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in the slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at sea, we are far too easily pleased. So in essence, Solomon doesn't say this explicitly, but what we can learn from it is that we aim too low. We aim too low when it comes to this questions of meaning and purpose in life, because those can only be found by something infinite. Only be met with something infinite. So a number of questions that this what we've read today provokes. Where can we find a sense of joy that laughter only hints at? Where can we find a glorious intoxication that alcohol cannot give? Where can we find an ecstasy and an intimacy that sex only points to? Where can we find a sense of security and value that ambition faintly whispers about? And where can we find a true treasure of riches that can't be taken away? The theologian Augustine answers for us. He says, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." Once again, I think this whole sermon can be boiled down to a word of focus. Because whether we are conscious of it or not, we distract ourselves with so many things. Our minds are so busy with so many earthly things, so much of it that we put so much energy towards we won't be thinking about or caring about in 6 months. All the little mice that cover the rhinoceros. So as we prepare to worship through singing, I wonder if there's anyone here who you recognize something about yourself. Like, I'm describing all this and you're like, oh yeah, that's familiar. all the little mice you're chasing around in your life, the things in your career, the things in your family, the things in your schedule, the things, all these little things that you desire, the things that you occupy your mind with, and you recognize that you've lost a bit of focus on what's important. And so if that is you today, if you recognize that in of yourself today, that you want today to be a day of reorientation where you're like, okay, let's once again just quiet ourselves and allow ourselves to be, to be open to the fact that we're 30,000 feet in the air. But God is with us. I don't need to be distracted. I need to be focused on God's love for me as he displayed his love through Jesus and his work on the cross and through his resurrection of the dead. It's not life under the sun, S-U-N, it's life under the sun, S-O-N. But is there anyone today who needs to recalibrate their focus? You want to put off the distractions. If you'd be so vulnerable as to stand, to ask for prayer so that your brothers and sisters can pray over you for just to get back on track this week, would you be willing to stand now? Who needs a refreshment of focus today? Is there anyone? Brothers and sisters, can we come around these? Ask to put a hand on their shoulder and lift them up. Our great God, you are the giver of good gifts. And yet sometimes the gifts become a distraction because we have forgotten about who you are. We look for meaning and purpose and satisfaction in so many things because we have somehow become dull or numb or deaf or blind to the goodness that is in you. So God, help us to treasure you for who you are, recognize our need and our focus. Our alarm clocks go off and we hit the ground running, and there's breakfast to make, there's kids to wake up and get ready for school, there's ways that we need to prepare for the day, and we're off and running. We have so many things. Our cell phones that go off, our emails to check, grocery lists to make. It just feels nonstop. But God, help us to learn to walk with you in all of that. Yes, absolutely. Let's try to have our quiet times with you where we're completely focused on you, but let's continue to practice your presence as we go, as we drive, as we live and breathe. We need a refreshment and a reminder of our need for you, God. So I pray that, God, I pray that someone in here today would feel a sense of dissatisfaction with the things that they're chasing. I pray that they would feel a hunger. I pray that they would recognize, yeah, it's all meaningless. It's all smoke. I need something bigger. I need something better. I need something infinite. And so let us recalibrate our focus on you today. Speak to us clearly. Change our hearts. It's in Jesus, the great King, we ask these things. Amen. Would you stand with us as we worship?
Shadow Tell me, where could I run from your light? Where could I hide? Hemmed within your precious love. There's no hiding from your love. Highs and lows, Lord, you're with me the way it goes. Should I rise or should I fall? Even so, Lord, your mercy isn't even flow. You're too good to let me go. Should I dance on the heights or make my bed among the depths? Mercy waits at every end, like you planned it from the start. Should the dawn come with wings, find me far side of the sea, there your hand still fastens me, ever closer to your heart. Oh, highs and lows, Lord, you're with me the way it goes. Should I rise or should I fall? Even so, Lord, your mercy isn't even flow. Should I rise or should I fall? You are faithful through it all. You're too good to let me go.
Are you grateful to serve a God that gives us meaning? Yeah? It's so important. Man, life under the sun is terrifying on its own, but we're just so grateful that there is a God, but that he's also revealed himself to us, because he didn't have to, but he did, and he came among us in the person of Jesus. So we thank you, God. Thank you, God, for giving us meaning. Something coming up that is a bit in development is, you might remember last summer we gathered together and went to a Dayton Dragons game. Well, we plan to do that again on September the 5th, and I think the cost is $15. We don't quite have the registration ready yet, but that'll be available in the coming weeks. It was a really great time. We had like a whole section of just us. It was like, oh, it's a bunch of people I know. And we were just, having a good time at the baseball game. It was great. So let's remember our giving today, our giving which helps to support the ministry of this church. It is an act of worship. It's recognizing how God has been generous to us and giving a portion back to God, saying, hey, God, we believe what you are doing here with our ministry, because our ministry here isn't meaningless. It isn't smoke. We do believe we are impacting eternity. So let's put our money towards eternal things. Yeah. And also, if you're new or newer, you can go to the welcome desk and learn how you can get more connected here at Refuge Hill, and they'll have a gift for you there. So great to see you guys today. We look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers.